Hello, Algebra 1.5 students. This is Mr. Kitchens. Today we're going to talk about simple interest. Next video we'll hit on compound interest. So let's say you went to a bank today or tomorrow and you had $1,000 in principal. That's what the P stands for. Principal means the main piece. It's the piece you bring to them. And you give them that $1,000. Would you expect that, let's say they hold on to it for about a year, would you expect that same $1,000 back, or would you expect for them to give you more? And clearly, we put money in the bank partially to save it and to actually secure it, but we also kind of would like to have a return on our investment, which would be called interest. So most banks are going to give you some kind of interest rate, and just to be a little straightforward, we're gonna say the reality of it, the interest rates in savings account these days is really low, but why don't we just say it's 1% or 0.01. Now, when you come back a year later, you're going to want to know what your amount is. How much total money you're going to get back. And you know you're going to get back, hopefully, that initial principal plus your interest. And we'll call that I. Now, the way they calculate the interest is they actually multiply this interest, which is the interest rate. That's your interest rate, and I should have marked that as R too. And they're going to multiply that by the time. And then they're going to multiply that by the total amount that you gave them. And you can write it that way, or you can write it PRT is probably how you've seen it before. So the order of the letters doesn't matter because we're multiplying. So that we can rewrite the amount equation and say it equals P plus PRT. So we've substituted PRT for I. And we know one thing, that principal is $1,000, so that's not changing in itself. So that's a constant. And here it is again, and so is the rate. That won't change. So those are all constants. T is your only thing that might vary, and that's your time. So some of you may recognize this formula looks pretty similar to this formula here. If you remember, y equals b plus mx. X is your variable in that equation, and m is a constant. So just like p times r is the same thing as m, and b is a constant. Usually you see this as mx plus b. And we know this to be the equation of a line. And this is one indicator when you look at this equation, a equals p plus PRT. You know that's going to be the equation of a line, so that's why it's called simple interest. You're only getting interest based on the principal and the time, of course, and the rate. But it's going to increase at a steady rate. The way we can also write this is we can factor out the p, and you've seen it written this way, and that's probably the most frequent way you've seen this. P equals 1 plus RT. So what I want to show you today, along with that, is GeoGebra and how we can help get GeoGebra to help us with doing these problems. So I can actually type in some of my key values like P, and I'm going to put a capital P. GeoGebra is kind of picky. I'm going to say it's $1,000. I'm going to enter that in there, so we have P equals 1,000 up there. Then I'm also going to say my rate equals 0.01. And GeoGebra doesn't really know what T is, so we're going to use X, because that's really the X-axis. We're going to go in years to the right, and as the years increase, we want to know how much our amount increases. So let's now type in the A equation, and we could put it as, let's just write it as P times 1 plus Rx. And let's see what happens. Now we're not going to see that on the graph for some reason, but we do see it up here. And I'm going to change that F. I'm going to make that an A to the X. So that's our amount. The X in parentheses just means it's a function, and it means A is a function of whatever X is, and X is your years. So the equation looks pretty good. We've put the rate in there as 0.01. We got the principal, so Where is our line, though? And where it is that we gave him $1,000 to begin with. So at 0 years, we start off with 1,000. So I want to click on this Move Graphics View button so I can kind of scrunch this scale on the y-axis. So I'm going to pull that down until I can get my 1,000. Doesn't take too long. And there it is. So you can tell it doesn't grow very fast. So if I wanted to know how much money I would get back if I left it in that account for 20 years, I'd have to go out to 20 years, which is here, and kind of come up this line here and until I intersect that line and go across. I'd make about $1,200. And that kind of makes sense, because if I have amount equals P times 1 plus RT, 1,000 times 1 plus, let me get this, sorry about that. I'm rewriting this equation, 1,000.01 times T, which is 20 years. We can simplify this to 1,000 times 20 times 0.01. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. That 0 is going to allow us to go over 1 decimal. So basically, we could just 1 times 20 is 20. Another way to do it is to say it's 20. And then we have 2 decimal split spots. So this simplifies to 1,000 times 1.20. And that gives me $1,200. And these are dollars. So that's after 20 years. In Geogebra, I can do this maybe a little bit more simple. I want to get this Y line, and Geogebra can do things like find you an intersecting point. To do that, though, we first need to establish that line that goes up from 20. And that's actually called the x equals 20 line. So if I type x equals 20 into the input bar like I just did, then it'll graph that line. And then I need to go to this tool over here. This is the point tool. Usually it's on the new point, but we want to hit this triangle and come down to intersect 2 objects. And then we can select the 2 objects. They'll highlight when I touch them. I don't want to get too close to here. Normally I want to just touch somewhere along the line out there and out here. I can also select it over here, x equals 20. And then also this equation, A, the amount equation. So I'm going to click that one and click the X line, and it'll give you an intersecting point. And what it says is point B is at 20, 1,200. Well, we know the first term represents X, which is 20 years, and the Y coordinate represents $1,200. So after 20 years, the amount you'd get back from the bank would be $1,200. Well, how much of this is principal? Let's go back to our notes. If 1,200 is the amount we get back, well, we know the amount equals the P plus the I, and that equals 1,000 plus I, and we have the amount is equal to 1,200. I'm going to subtract 1,000 from both sides, and I get $200 equals the I. So the interest is $200. And this hopefully helped you a little bit with understanding how you can use Geogebra. Geogebra gets even more important and helpful when you get to compound interest, and that's what we'll do next.